So on this third session in Refugee Meet for the Museum of London, we're going to focus on the way in which Huguenots contributed to the performing arts in this great metropolis in the 18th century. And we're going to start by looking at Pierre Preller, born in London, the son of a silk weaver in Spitalfields. He was baptized at the original French Protestant church in Threadneedle Street. Pierre Preller became the first organist of Christ Church, Spitalfields. The organ by bridge was completed in 1735, and Preller was elected to that position in 1736. He's remembered today by his introduction to singing that provided an opportunity for persons of the meanest capacities to, in a short time, learn to sing in tune. The Museum of London acquired a later edition of this work in 1983, which was shown in the exhibition the museum hosted, The Quiet Conquest, the Huguenots, 1685 to 1985. If you're interested, you can see the whole copy of this introduction to singing in an early edition in the Library of Congress in Washington, DC, which is available online. Pierre Preller had actually started as a writing master, and he was associated with the Society of Schoolmasters, and evidently had a great following in Spitalfields, where he taught at the charity schools associated with Christ Church, the Dissenters Charity School in Corbett's Court. Sadly, he died in 1741, and rather movingly, at the funeral service in Christ Church, many of the charity school children that he taught sung at his funeral. As well as his association with Christ Church, Pierre Preller wrote music for the theatre, and he's associated with the Goodman Fields Theatre, where perhaps one of the most famous actors of all time to perform on the British stage, David Garrick, performed in 1740 in so-called pantomime entitled Harlequin Hermit, or the Arabian Courtesan. And it was Pierre Preller who was in the orchestra pit playing the harpsichord for Garrick's first performance. We are now going to look at that giant of the English stage, David Garrick. And the Museum of London is fortunate to have a very smart brown velvet suit in which David Garrick, who was possibly the most painted sitter of the British 18th century, was painted in Rome by the Italian artist Pompeo Bertoni. And that portrait is in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. Garrick was very generous-minded and had a huge circle of friends from all walks of society. Garrick, in fact, gave the portrait to Richard Kay, an antiquary and Church of England clergyman, who eventually became Dean of Lincoln Cathedral in the 1780s. In return, Richard Kay gave David Garrick an antique gem that Kay had found in the baths of Caracalla. David Garrick's portrait by Tony was painted in Rome when Garrick was travelling with his Catholic wife, who was a dancer, and through France, Italy, and Germany, and what is now Belgium. By the 1760s, when the portrait was painted, Garrick had an established reputation, having worked very closely with the works of William Shakespeare to interpret so many of that great writer's plays on the London stage. The Museum of London is fortunate to have a painting by Francis Hayman of David Garrick in the role of Ranger in Dr. Benjamin Hoadley's play, The Suspicious Husband, performed in 1747 at the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, which Garrick was to manage with enormous success. Garrick played the role of Ranger in The Suspicious Husband 120 times. But perhaps his most famous role was that of Richard III, which was captivated in an engraving by William Hogarth of Garrick in the title role, which helped to promote the actor's reputation internationally. One of those who attended the performance of Richard III was Ignatius Sancho. Sancho was born on a slave ship in 1729, crossing the Atlantic. He was brought by his owner as a child to London and looked after by 3 maiden sisters in Greenwich, where he met John, 2nd Duke of Montague, who noticed his intelligence, encouraged him to read, and eventually Ignatius Sancho became butler to the 2nd Duke of Montague's widow, Mary, who was in fact younger daughter of John Churchill, Duke of Marlborough. On her death in 1751, Sancho was eventually employed by her son-in-law, George, also Duke of Montague. And Sancho was painted in Bath by Thomas Gainsborough in 1768, a portrait which is now in the National Gallery in Canada. Garrick tried to persuade Sancho to play the role of Othello, but unfortunately a speech impediment meant that Sancho's attempt at a stage career failed. Garrick's friendship with Sancho is a demonstration of Garrick's extraordinary network, both to promote his role as theatre manager at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane and to share his love of social engagement. And it is appropriate that Garrick's memory is preserved today, not just by these wonderful treasures in the Museum of London and his role as a collector, which is recorded in furnishings from his house at the Adelphi, now in the Victorian Albert Museum, or the extraordinary statue created of Shakespeare, for which Garrick himself posed, that was sculpted by Roubiliac, that can be seen in the public area of the British Library. From 1754, Garrick acquired a country house at Hampton, and the temple that Garrick commissioned to honour Shakespeare's memory, which housed the Roubiliac statue, can still be seen beside the Thames. But Garrick's memory is also preserved by the Garrick Club in Garrick Street, Covent Garden, an area where Garrick walked the streets during his mature lifetime. And that has 1,300 members and a wonderful collection of portraits of Garrick in many various acting roles and painting by Zoffany of his home at Hampton. So there's much to be discovered across London that records Garrick's role in transforming the British stage. Thank you.